Hey everyone, this is William Moore, and you're watching Beyond the Ties That Bind. Before I get going with the program, I wanted to throw something out there. I know that in a previous program I was joking around about the Wuhan flu, the coronavirus. However, right now I'm being absolutely serious. When you go to the grocery store, it would be advisable to check the back of the package and see if the product you're purchasing came from China. If it did, put it back on the shelf. Maybe even point out to the manager of the grocery store products that he is carrying in his store which are coming from China. We have no idea right now what's going on. We cannot trust the United States government to be upfront with us and tell us the truth about this virus. You surely cannot trust the Chinese government to be upfront and tell us what's going on. So until we find out the truth, or hopefully until this all just fades away like SARS, Ebola, H1N1, the swine flu, the bird flu, and it comes to naught, which hopefully it does. But anyway, until we find out what's actually going on, it would probably be best for the safety of you and your family to not purchase products which come from China. We have no idea how this virus is transmitted from one human being to another. So until we find out more about this, I read labels all the time, but I personally am going to avoid any product that comes from China. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there because, like I said, I have no idea um, what's true and what's false about the coronavirus right now. And if there's anything that we do know, it is we cannot trust the United States government to be upfront with us. So anyway, on the program today, I am going to be reading to you the most important letter in the history of America. This is absolutely positively the most important letter in the history of this country. Now, back in 1787, some men got together, 55 of them, one of them left, so you had 54. But of these gentlemen, most of them were attorneys and bankers, and they came up with the document now known as the United States Constitution. During the Constitutional Convention, which was a coup d'etat, they were seeking to overthrow the current system, or the system that they had back then. They were seeking to overthrow that system, which was under the Articles of Confederation, and replace it with a document that provided a vehicle for a group of psychopaths. We're talking about attorneys and bankers, people. Provided a document which would be a vehicle that gave power of unlimited taxation to this group of psychopaths. And when you give power of taxation to a group of psychopaths, what you're doing is you're giving them control over every aspect of your life. So anyway, George Washington, that guy that everyone's so fond of, I cannot tell a lie. He was actually one of the biggest liars and biggest cowards of all time. And he was a tyrant. So much so that when you read about the letter in which we get the quote from Thomas Jefferson talking about the tree of liberty needing to be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants, the tyrant that Mr. Jefferson was talking about at that time was George Washington. Don't believe me? Look it up. It was all about Shays' Rebellion. But anyway, George Washington wrote this letter. This letter was included in all of the transmittals to the state conventions, the state ratifying conventions, which would take place in the 13 colonies. So this letter was included, and in some state ratification conventions, this letter was read aloud before the Constitution was read, and then read aloud once again after the Constitution was read. So in Virginia, of course, we know the great Patrick Henry one of the smartest men of all time and knew more about the Constitution than anybody out there today knows. He objected to the Constitution, objected to the adoption of the Constitution by the state of Virginia. When he was invited to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, he rightly said, "I smell a rat." And then he gave a very passionate speech talking about why the Constitution should not be adopted, that it was not a document that restrained government and protected freedom. It did absolutely the opposite. It restrained freedom and protected government. And if people would read the Constitution, go back, go past the Bill of Rights, the 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, which the Patriot Act does away with anyway. But if people would just get beyond the Bill of Rights, originally there were 12 amendments, now there are only 10. It was whittled down to 10. But if you could get past the Bill of Rights and see that it's powerless, it has done nothing to protect anyone over the course of the last 240 some odd years, you would see that the Constitution, the articles, the sections, the clauses, does nothing more than take away your freedom, does nothing more than trample upon your freedom, your property, your very existence. The document is not holy. It has less value than a roll of toilet paper. Yeah, I said it. I'll say it to anyone's face. It has less value than a roll of toilet paper. The document should be scrapped. Well, and it has been scrapped, really. The government treads all over the Constitution all the time, the Bill of Rights. But anyway, in the Bill of Rights, you have amendments. The definition of an amendment is an addition or change to a legal or statutory document. So just as easily as that document can have an amendment added, it can have an amendment taken away, or it can have a previous amendment nullified. So I'm going to read this letter from good old George Washington that he wanted read at all the state ratifying conventions before they voted to adopt or give the thumbs down to the Constitution. Sir, okay, hold on one second. Need the specs. Sir, we have now the honor to submit to the consideration of the United States in Congress assembled that Constitution which has appeared to us the most advisable. The friends of our country have long seen and desired that the power of making war, peace, and treaties, that of levying money, aka taxation, and regulating commerce, and the correspondent executive and judicial authorities should be fully and effectually vested in the general government of the Union. But the impropriety of delegating such extensive trust to one body of men is evident. Hence results the necessity of a different organization. The different organization he's talking about is they had basically scrapped the Articles of Confederation. They did it illegally. They did away with the Articles of Confederation and replaced it with this document known as the Constitution. It is obviously impracticable in the federal government of these states to secure all rights of independent sovereignty to each, and yet provide for the interest and safety of all. Now listen. Individuals entering into society must give up a share of liberty to preserve the rest. The magnitude of the sacrifice must depend as well on situation and circumstance as on the object to be obtained. It is at all times difficult to draw with precision the line between those rights which must be surrendered and those which may be preserved, and on the present occasion, this difficulty was increased by a difference among the several states as to their situation, extent, habits, and particular interest. That right there, people, should convince anyone that the document known as the Constitution does not protect freedoms. He says right here, individuals entering into society must give up a share of liberty to preserve the rest. The rest that he's talking about is the interest, of course, of the people who were framing the Constitution, and the safety, of course, of those who were framing the Constitution, because they were hoping that once again, when people found out what they were up to, they weren't going to have another rebellion and hang every one of them. So, I'm going to continue with the letter. In all our deliberations on this subject, we kept steadily in our view that which appears to us the greatest interest of every true American, the consolidation of our Union, in which is involved our prosperity, felicity, safety, perhaps our national existence. I tend to doubt that the greatest interest of every true American was the consolidation of the Union at that time. Unless by true American he means government lackey or bootlicker. So, this important consideration, seriously and deeply impressed on our minds, led each state in the convention to be less rigid on points of inferior magnitude than might have been otherwise expected. And thus, the Constitution, which we now present, is the result of a spirit of amity and of that mutual deference and concession which the peculiarity of our political situation rendered indispensable. That it will meet the full and entire approbation of every state is not, perhaps, to be expected, but each will doubtless consider that had her interest alone been consulted, the consequences might have been particularly disagreeable or injurious to others. That it is liable to us, or that it is liable to as few exceptions as could reasonably have been expected, we hope and believe that it may promote the lasting welfare of that country so dear to us all, and secure her freedom and happiness, is the most ardent wish. With great respect, we have the honor to be, sir, your excellency's most obedient and humble servants, George Washington, President, by unanimous order of the convention. Okay, right here it says at the very end, we hope and believe that it may promote the lasting welfare of that country so dear to us all, and secure her freedom and happiness is our most ardent wish. Well, securing the freedom and happiness of the country? No, of the government. Because you cannot, I mean, this is a contradictory statement. You're talking about freedom and happiness here, but up here you're saying individuals entering into society must give up a share of liberty to preserve the rest. The magnitude of the sacrifice must depend as well on situation and circumstance as on the object to be obtained. The East India Company, and of course the power to print its own money. But the East India Company was the main reason that the War of Independence took place. It wasn't a revolutionary war, it was a war of independence. The East India Company had a monopoly on importing and exporting. So when you have the monopoly on importing and exporting, and it's getting harder and harder for these men to make money, then they rebelled against the East India Company, whose charter was held by the crown. That is the reason why, not taxation, because here you have a government or a people who are supposedly rebelling against taxation, only then to form a government that has the unlimited power of taxation and starts demanding payment in taxes in gold and silver. from people who actually helped fight in this war of independence, and then they start confiscating the property of people when they can't pay these taxes. I mean, here, this government, the government, even under the Articles of Confederation, which is why, the Articles of Confederation were no good either. They did not secure any individual's freedom, but here you had this government under the Articles of Confederation. That's why you had Shays Rebellion. But under the Articles of Confederation, the government was paying people who fought in the War of Independence with a worthless paper script. Then they were demanding that taxes be paid in gold and silver. And when people could not pay the taxes, the government would come in and confiscate the property of the people who could not pay the taxes. That's one reason why you had Shays Rebellion, which then Shays Rebellion scared these bankers and these attorneys, and it scared them into creating the United States Constitution. The United States Constitution is not a freedom document, and I will give a link to the Constitution. And this letter is probably about 3/4 of the way down the page, and I'll provide a link in the description, and I want people to read this letter, and then if you can tell me with a straight face that the Constitution protects your freedom, I will tell you with a straight face some stuff myself. But anyway, the Constitution is worthless. It is a worthless piece of trash. The Constitution, and I'm not even talking about the writer known as the Bill of Rights, which wasn't even around during the state ratifying conventions. The Bill of Rights didn't exist during the state ratifying conventions. So those of you who want to talk about the Bill of Rights being part of the Constitution, you don't know what you're talking about, because the Bill of Rights didn't even exist when the states were debating whether or not they were going to adopt the Constitution. The Constitution is consists of articles, sections, and clauses. And in those articles, sections, and clauses, the government is given, and I'll just go right here. I believe I have, let's see. There's a part here. Let's see. It talks about, let's see, calling forth of a militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrection, and repel invasion. Okay, so repel invasion is last. Suppress insurrection is first. That's why the Constitution was created. To raise and support armies. Section 8. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts, and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. So, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and amongst the several states and with the Indian tribes. So, they had the power to regulate trade. The Constitution is not a freedom document, for the 100th time, and you will probably hear it for the 200th time. The Constitution is nothing more than a piece of paper, and it has no more value. Actually, Charmin, Northern, and Angelsoft are more valuable than the Constitution. The Constitution is worthless. So let's separate the idea of freedom from the Constitution. Everybody talks about freedom. Everybody talks about, in the same breath, the Constitution. How can you do so? It just proves to me that you don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about freedom and the Constitution in the same breath. Educate yourselves. And get it out of your mind. Leave behind the indoctrination, the brainwashing which has taken place in your life that tells you that the Constitution is a freedom document, or this one, the most ridiculous statement, a Christian document. The United States government was formed by deists, Freemasons, people who scorned the scriptures, people who insulted Messiah. I know there's a guy going around out there, David Barton, who lies and talks about the Constitution and the framers like they were holy men. That man is full of shit. He lies through his teeth, which most Christians do. Most Christians in power. I'm not talking about the person who's out there who's being deceived by these people in power. I believe there are people with some very good hearts and good intentions, but we know what they say about good intentions. So David Barton, he lies. He lies about the framers. They were not Christians. They were not believers. They did not hold Scripture in high regard. They insulted people who did, and they defamed Scripture. Also, in the Treaty of Tripoli, George Washington stated that the United States is not a Christian nation. So, and when you read the letters of the framers and you read the whole letters and you don't just take parts out like David Barton does to lie to people, when you read the entire letter of a particular framer, such as Washington or Adams, you'll see that they did not hold Christianity in high regard whatsoever. I challenge you to challenge me on that one, because if people want to hold to these lies, I will prove that they are lies. If you want to challenge me with your lies, I will prove that what you believe is nothing more than bullshit. So, anyway, we have to realize that that absolute liberty is the absence of restraint, or absolute freedom is the absence of restraint. So, when you have a document like the Constitution, which provides for restraints of freedom, you cannot have freedom. So, absolute freedom requires the absence of restraint. So, absolute freedom requires the absence of a piece of paper known as the United States Constitution. So I want to read here a quote from Lysander Spooner. But whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we have had, or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist. Lysander Spooner, from the book No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority. This book costs $5 on Amazon. I recommend that everyone go out there and get it. You can actually download it free and read it on your computer or your pad. But this book is a must read for anyone out there, anyone who loves freedom. And he is the father of the saying, taxation is theft. Okay, so I also want to read something, and Lysander Spooner lived about 80 years after the Constitution was adopted. So when I say 80 years, consider that he's writing it from his time. And yet we have what purports or professes or is claimed to be a contract, the Constitution, made 80 years ago by men who are now all dead, and who never had any power to bind us, but which, it is claimed, has nevertheless bound 3 generations of men, consisting of many millions, and which, it is claimed, will be binding upon all the millions that are to come, but which nobody ever signed, sealed, delivered, witnessed, or acknowledged, and which few persons, compared with the whole number that are claimed to be bound by it, have ever read or ever seen or ever will read or see. And that is so true. There's a lot of people that thump that Constitution, have no idea what it says. They might know the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, but past that, they know nothing. And you cannot have a contract which binds future generations. No one has the authority to enter their um, generations that follow, especially those that are not even related to them, into a contract which binds that generation which hasn't even been born yet. And also you have a Frederick Bastiat. Um, he writes, as long as it is admitted that the law may be diverted from its true purpose, and we're talking natural law, that it may violate property instead of protecting it, then everyone will want to participate in making the law, either to protect himself against plunder or to use it for plunder. And that's why we have that magical document known as the Constitution, because you have men who want to participate in making the law, either to protect themselves, which is what the framers did. They wanted to have their own company, which would basically be a monopoly on importing and exporting. That's why they rebelled and had the War of Independence. It wasn't about taxation. Um, so you want to make law either to protect yourself from plunder or to use it for plunder. In this case, in the case of the United States Constitution, the men who framed and wrote the Constitution, they were using it to plunder and to protect themselves from plunder. So, another Bastiat, his book, The Law, is one that everyone should read too. Um, he says, the state is that great fiction by everyone. The state is that great fiction by which everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else. And that is so true. Um, so, anyway, this letter, and I'm going to leave the link, and I would like people to read this before you comment or hit the dislike button. This letter by George Washington. This letter basically gives us an insight into the minds of the men who created the Constitution. It was not about protecting freedom. It was about restraining freedom. He says in the letter, right within just a matter of seconds into the letter, individuals entering into society must give up a share of liberty to preserve the rest. And the rest that he's talking about is interest and safety of all. Why do you have to give up freedom? So people can be safe? Why do you have to give up freedom due to the interest of someone else? That makes no sense. The only way you're going to have safety is through freedom, true freedom. Freedom to protect yourself, freedom to live within society, and like Patrick Henry stated, be able to eat the fruit of your own labors without threat from someone else. So, we need to get away from this whole Constitution protects freedom. Constitution, gives us, liberty is actually, if you look up the word liberty, one of the synonyms to liberty is permission. So I'm getting away from you, and I've been getting away for a long time, getting away from using the word liberty because I don't need permission for my freedoms. Not at all. No one does. It gets down to this. It gets down to what Messiah said, and that is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. On this, the Torah and the prophets are encapsulated, basically, is what he was saying. So, and one thing that Brian from High Impact Flicks says all the time, which, I love the quote and I use it all the time: no one has a higher claim to your life and property than you do. And no one has a higher claim to your neighbor's life and property than your neighbor. If we just get that right, we will be a society that cannot be stopped. We need to get rid of government, and we need to get rid of this notion that the Constitution is a document which protects freedom. The document which you people out there, a lot of people, I'm not saying the people watching this, but maybe some, the document that a lot of people out there wave and say that this document protects my freedom, that same document restrains your freedom, constricts you from living a free life, and gives unlimited power of taxation and control to a group of men in Washington, D.C. So anyway, read the letter. And if you have any comments, please leave them below. I love reading the comments. I can't get back to any of them. I don't have the time to do so, but I do read each and every comment that comes in. Remember, hit the subscribe button, share these videos, hit the like button, and appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, this is William Moore with Beyond the Ties That Bind. Peace.
Breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking